Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great honor that I rise today on the first weekday of Black History Month to anchor the Congressional Black Caucus's commemoration of Black History Month. 2026 marks a century of public commemorations of Black history, which began in 1926, founded by historian Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. It was originally conceived as a week-long celebration called Negro History Week, expanded to the full month of February by President Ford in 1976. Why February? To coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. In his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, Woodson wrote, "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from teaching of biography in history." Said another way, if you don't know where you come from and you don't know where you've been, you don't fully understand who and where you are, and you don't know where you're going. I grew up a student of history. My father would be 101 years old this year. He grew up under the tyranny of Jim Crow in Tennessee and in Alabama. My mother grew up under the tyranny of Jim Crow in Mississippi. I grew up listening to the stories of what their life was like when they saw the best of government through the New Deal in the midst of the Depression, and they saw the worst of government in Jim Crow. They told stories, particularly on my father's side, of his father and his grandfather. We didn't know who his great-grandfather was, because whatever plantation he was born on in Montevallo, Alabama, they didn't think him worthy enough to record his name or his birthday. But we were fortunate enough to know who the first James Fenimore McClellan was, also born in Montevallo. But because he died when my grandfather was 10 years old, we know very little about him. What we do know about him, we got from family lore. But my step-great-grandfather wrote a book called Inching Along. And it is through that book that I fully came to understand my family's history, which was Black history, which was American history. How my great-grandfather had to take a literacy test and find 3 white men to vouch for his character to be able to register to vote after Reconstruction ended. How my father and my grandfather had to pay poll taxes, despite the 15th Amendment saying all of them could vote, just to be able to register to vote. How my mother, my grandmothers, my great-grandmothers didn't get to vote until after the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The horror that I felt watching the murder of George Floyd on the internet in 2020 was the same horror that my parents felt watching the aftermath of the murder of Emmett Till. Because history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. And through my family's history, through the study of American history, I've recognized a pattern. I was born and raised in Virginia, the birthplace of American democracy, in July of 1619, when the first representative legislature in the Western Hemisphere met in Jamestown. And a month later, Virginia became the birthplace of American slavery when a ship of men and women who were stolen from their home in Angola were then stolen again from pirates, were brought to the shores at Point Comfort and sold, traded for supplies. A few short years later, maybe a little over 100, a Virginian penned the words that we will celebrate this July. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, and he meant men, were created, endowed by their Creator with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He didn't mean all men. He didn't mean the men who were enslaved at his plantation. But the idea of the founding of this country has been one that African Americans have strove to make true for everyone. And every time we have made progress in making those ideals a reality, there's been a backlash. And that backlash involves three things: violence, propaganda, and voter suppression. My great-grandparents saw the first backlash. My grandparents and my parents saw the second backlash. My generation is living through the third. And yet, we have a president that doesn't want us to talk about the bad parts of our history, but they inspire me. This past spring, when I took my children to the African American History Museum, not for the first time, and I stood in the exhibit on the Middle Passage, which I'd been in many times before. It's a heavy exhibit. It's an ugly part of our history. But I felt hope, because that time I realized that somebody survived that hell so that I could be here in this body, in this fight, a fight they never could have imagined. And while I fight the same fights as my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, and whoever survived that voyage, I do so from a position of strength and power they never imagined. And I fight those fights so that my children and my grandchildren don't have to. And I am proud to be in this fight as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we will fight the erasure of our history, and we will celebrate it every single day. And with that, I would like to yield to our chair, the Honorable Yvette Clarke of New York.